All right, let's look at operations on functions. So addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. All right, so here's the definition. So if you do f plus g of x, this simply means that f of x plus g of x. All right, and you can guess f minus g of x would be simply f of x minus g of x. And f times g of x is f of x multiplied by g of x, as we expected. And f over g of x is f of x on top divided by g of x. So there's no surprise there. All right, let's find the domain of each one. All right, since f plus g, in order for f plus g to make sense, f of x and g of x has to make sense by themselves. All right, so the domain of f plus g is really the intersection of domain of f and the domain of g. Right? This is actually true for f minus g and f times g. So domain of f minus g is same as domain of f plus g, which is the intersection of those two domains. And the same thing with the domain of f times g is exactly the same. All right. The only different one is the domain of f over g. All right. So the reason is g of x is sitting as a denominator. So when it becomes 0, that becomes problematic. So the domain of f over g is, of course, we have to make sure that it's going to be within domain of f intersect domain of g, right? But we have to actually eliminate whatever the x value such that g of x becomes 0. So we take the intersection between those two domains, domain of f and domain of g, and then you remove the x values that makes the denominator equal to 0. All right? So those are the operations on functions and their corresponding domains. All right? So let's look at this following example, problem number 30. All right? So let's find the first, a domain of f. All right? So remember that we have to make sure that expression inside the square root has to be non-negative. All right? So which gives us, all right, so you have, I'm going to actually add x. So you have a 3 is greater than or equal to x. All right, so that'll be the domain. So domain, so this tells you that the domain of f would be, right, negative infinity all the way to 3. 3 is included. All right, and how about the domain of g? All right, so we have to make sure that this guy right here is greater than or equal to 0. All right, so since inequality is a little bit too hard, so I'm going to pretend that this is equality. So x squared minus 1 equals 0. Then we can simply factor it out. So we have x plus 1 times quantity x minus 1 equals 0. Then we know that x is going to be plus or minus 1. All right, then you can do the number line. So I'm going to do a number line up here. All right, then I'm going to just put a tick mark for -1 and a +1. All right, then I'm going to make sure that the x squared minus 1. So here is, we have x squared minus 1. We want to make sure that this is going to be non-negative. Alright, let's try something less than negative 1. So x equals, say, negative 2. If you plug that in, negative 2 squared 4 minus 1, so that's going to be positive there. Alright, between negative 1 and 1, we can try a sample x equals 0, which is going to be negative. Alright, and anything bigger than 1, I'll try positive 2. 2 squared minus 1 is 3, which is positive. Alright, so it seems like we can take anything below negative 1, including negative 1, or above positive 1. Alright, so that'll be in interval notation, we have domain of G would be, right, so it's going to be negative infinity all the way to negative 1. Alright, then also starting from 1 to positive infinity. Alright, so those are the domain of F and the domain of G. Alright, so let's find F plus G. So part A. Alright, so F plus G of X is going to be equal to, simply just addition of square root of 3 minus x and the square root of x squared minus 1. Alright, and I'm going to do the part B as well. So B, F minus G of x is equal to square root of 3 minus x minus square root of x squared minus 1. Alright, and the C, F times G, so Fg of x is equal to, you just multiply those together. So you have 3 minus x times square root of x squared minus 1. I guess if you want, we can put it under the same square root. Then multiply 3 minus x and x squared minus 1. Alright, so let's find the domain of all three. Remember that these domains are all the same. So you have here, domain of F plus G is actually the same as domain of F minus G, which is the same as the domain of F times G. Alright, so this is going to be just the, remember, it's an intersection of domain of F and the domain of G. Alright, so we're going to take the intersection between here, negative infinity to 3. Alright, do the intersection with, alright, so let's see, I'm gonna use a curly bracket. So here we have domain of G would be negative infinity to negative 1 union 1 to positive infinity. Alright, so if you combine that together, let's see what's in common between those two sets. Alright, it looks like it's going to go from negative infinity to, alright, so it's going to actually go over negative 1 and union, and you're going to still have 1, and then you're going to go all the way up to 3. Right? So this is the domain of those three guys, F plus G, F minus G, and F times G. All right. How about the part D, derivative? Not the derivative, the division. So D, F divided by G of x. All right. So f of x is a square root of 3 minus x, and the g is square root of x squared minus 1. Right? If you want, we can put it under the same square root. We have 3 minus x over x squared minus 1. All right, so in order to find the domain of f divided by g, we need to find, let's see, x value that makes the denominator equal to 0. So what are these? So we want to find x values where g of x is 0. All right? So we can set the g of x equal to 0. You can see that it's just a plus. We actually did that up here. It's a plus or minus 1. So here it's a plus 1, minus 1, and a plus 1. All right, so what we need to do is we need to take the domain of f intersect the domain of g, which we found here, but we have to eliminate -1 and a +1. All right, so it means that we just have to eliminate -1 and a +1. So it's going to be negative infinity to -1. All right, since we eliminate -1, so we're going to use the right parenthesis instead of a square bracket, and the left parenthesis on 1, 2, 3. All right, so that is the domain of f divided by g. All right, so that's it. I hope that this was clear.